Welcome to PCS with Military.com. I'm your host, Amy Bouchatz, Military.com's executive editor. On this podcast, we talk about everything you need to know to make this military move season your best yet. PCS with Military.com is brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union, proudly serving all branches of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. No matter where you are in your military career, Navy Federal Credit Union has the products and resources to help you navigate your finances. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission. Now, let's get this PCS started. Sometimes when it comes to military moves, you just want someone to lay it out for you and tell you what to do to make it as pain-free as possible. That certainly is true when it comes to the financial stuff around a PCS. Why can't someone tell it like it is and just give me instructions? That's why we have people like Ryan Guina, a military veteran. He's also the founder of popular personal finance sites, CashMoneyLife.com and the MilitaryWallet.com. We think his advice and expertise is so great that we hired him to give financial advice a few times a month as a regular feature on Military.com. Today, he's joining us to share his best money hacks for military moves. Ryan, welcome to PCS with Military.com.
Oh, thanks for having me, Amy. It's a pleasure.
Man, I am so excited that you're here to clear the air on some of this money stuff, because I think it's a beast that people just don't like to look directly in the eye, and then it's sitting on them and you can't help but look at it until it's too late. So, it's going to be good. Okay, so you're a military veteran, as I mentioned, and like my family right now, you're currently with the National Guard. How many times have you moved with or without the military?
Well, with and without, yeah, that's a great question. So with the military, I moved 3 times. My wife was also active duties, and she PCSed a few times on her own. We got married after I got out. And then on the civilian side, we moved twice locally and twice interstate. So we've moved several times.
I find they all count because you learn something each and every time that applies to the next time. So it's all they all count. We don't discriminate with moves here at PCSmilitary.com. We count them all.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the most confusing things about military moves when it comes to how the government pays for them is, or helps pay for them, right, is the government travel card, or GTC. So I just want to dive into this right away today. Start by telling us what the GTC is, what it can be used for, and what it can't be used for, because I find that this is a whole source of confusion.
Yeah, it is. The GTC, like you said, government travel card, is a mandatory card that when you come into the military, you have to get one. And it's used for any type of official government travel or government expense related to travel. So if you PCS somewhere, you're going to need to use it. If you're stopping somewhere overnight for lodging, if you have to get a uh, aircraft ticket, if you're going from overseas or from one base to another. You can charge meals. You can charge a rental car if it's authorized on your orders, fuel, other types of transportation. It does get a little bit confusing. You can also use it with PCSs as well. Sorry, TDYs, temporary duty assignments. So, for example, when you have the military do your move for you and they call the moving company out and they put all your stuff in the big truck and they ship it off, you're not going to have to swipe your card for that. The government's going to be billed directly for that. But if you're going between bases and you need to, whether you're driving or if you're flying there, or if you need to stop in a hotel for a few days for temporary lodging, those are the expenses you're going to put on the government travel card. What's not authorized, you can charge meals, but you can't charge alcohol on those meals. Um, so there's a lot of it's common sense. You should also not be using it for your regular shopping in between. Like if you're going from, well, and I know you're up in Alaska. So if you're going from California to Alaska, you're not going to want to put a whole bunch of cold weather gear on your government travel card. That would not be authorized because those would be personal expenses.
Mm-hmm.
So think in terms of personal and business, if you will. If it's officially related to travel, then that needs to go on your government travel card. If it's not directly related to that travel, then it doesn't. Thankfully, the government does require users to go through a training course once a year. It's a little dry, but they're revamping that and trying to make it.
No.
But
No, it sounds so interesting. How could it possibly be dry?
yep,
Go-
it does. It can get confusing though.
So, okay, so one of the worst things about the government travel card is that the rules around it have changed over time. I mean, like file this under stuff the military does all the time, right? They change the rules. Just when you figure it out, they change it to confuse you. And the other thing is that the rules kind of depend by the service. Who has to have this? Who is given it automatically? When you get it, and that kind of thing. Or at least that's been the case in the past. Is that still true today? Are they streamlining it across the DoD for the convenience of all of us?
I believe they're trying to streamline it. I don't have the answers for the different services. I
Hmm.
served active duty Air Force and now I'm in the Air National Guard. So that's
Yeah.
really my only direct experience there. I do believe that they have a standardized training course for all branches.
Okay.
So I know that most of the rules are going to go off of the um, let me see. They have the joint travel regulations. So
Right.
joint
Right.
meaning all branches. So the rules should be more or less the same between branches, but I don't have an answer to your question about whether it's standardized for who automatically receives a card and who doesn't. That I don't have an answer to.
Yeah, but that brings up a super good point, which is this, guys, check with your service. Always check with your service on anything because we're giving you our best advice. We're giving you the best standard that we know, and the information that's current as of this recording. Things change. Services change the rules. So double check with your service before you set out on your PCS or whatever to make sure that the information that we're giving you that is, as far as we know, as true as it's going to be, is still accurate. Because I'll tell you what, I woke up this morning, Ryan, and we have done so much work over time talking about the different ways of working with your military movers, and the Defense Department updated the frequently asked questions list to include a recommendation that you do not feed or tip your movers, which is a huge source of conversation, shall we say, over time. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so it's like it's a moving target, right? Because they have had in the travel or in the transportation recommendation for a long time that you don't have to, and then their FAQ said you could, and now they say you don't. And like stuff changes, so maybe that'll change again tomorrow. I don't know. But always check this stuff, guys. Always check with your service, with your transportation office, just to make sure everything's going as we think it is when we're recording this. Okay, so back to the GTC. This is something I find that does not change, or it hasn't since I've been watching this. What do people need to know about paying off the GTC?
Yeah. Great question. So, um, one of the other things I want to wrap back in before I answer that goes with your first question about what's confusing about it. And I just
Mm-hmm.
opened up the government travel card regulations. Now, this is put out by the Department of Defense. You must use the GTC for certain purchases. And I'm going to just read this quote here. It says, yeah, it won't be used as a basis for refusal to reimburse the traveler for authorized expenses. However, failure to use the travel card may subject the traveler to appropriate administrative or disciplinary action. So
Sounds dire.
it's required to use it. And I think what they want to do is streamline everything because this wraps into your question. What do people need to know about it? So you're going to be set up to have your card paid off by what's called split disbursement. And
Mm,
what that means is when you file your travel voucher after you move, or when you do TDY, for example, your authorized charges on your travel card will automatically be paid by the government. They'll take it directly from your paycheck and pay the government, or sorry, pay the travel card company.
mm,
Now, what people don't understand is you're still responsible for all the charges on your GTC, regardless of whether or not the government has reimbursed you yet. So let's say, for example, you go on uh, PCS and you take leave en route and you're on leave for a couple weeks and then you go here and you've already done a few charges and then you get to your next base, you file your travel voucher and there's a delay or something gets and delays never happen with military pay.
Yeah,
Uh,
never.
sarcasm. Delays happen frequently, but here's the thing: your payment is going to be due regardless. So if you
Mm,
aren't reimbursed yet, and that bill is out there, you may have to pay it out of pocket. So that's something to be aware of. So be very timely filing your travel vouchers and all of your orders and getting everything in as soon as possible. Because if you don't, that bill comes due, you may be required to pay it prior to actually having the funds from the government.
mhm,
And then you have to
mhm.
wait for the government to issue you a check, which changes the paperwork because initially they were going to do split disbursement and pay the company. If it happens where you pay the company and the military pays the company, then you have to request a check from the company, which further delays you getting reimbursed.
Oh, good
So
Lord.
yeah, it's not a happy, fun time. So this
No.
is one of those things where always stay up on top of your paperwork and getting it filed as soon as possible, and make sure you have everything that you need. Just always keep receipts. Um, and that goes for all your expenses along the way. Keep receipts for those because you will most likely be required to turn those in as well.
Yeah, you never know when you're going to need that stuff. Worst case scenario, you got a pile of receipts you didn't actually need, and all is well. Um, and if that's the worst thing that happens to me in a move, I'm good. That's fine. I don't care anymore, but man, you hear so many horror stories about this that people didn't understand how paying off the GTC works. And, we said sarcasm, but you're absolutely right. Stuff happens, people lose paperwork, it's delayed, whatever. And now you're responsible for that. And it's a whole hot mess, a whole hot mess. But I want to go back to really fast. You said government requires you to use the DTC for specific expenses. And I want to touch on why that's true. I've done a little bit of reporting on this. So I know that it's true because the government wants, they like you get reward points for using your credit card. Similar concept, right? They've got some sort of a reward going on for utilizing expenses on these credit cards. And so it is the best financial case for the government that all of those expenses and those rewards be going to them instead of you getting the credit card points for that. Which for those of us who love credit card points, and I know Ryan, you and I are on the same train on this, that's a little sad. It's a little sad because I love those points. I would like them for myself.
Yeah, I like credit card points as well, but just from an administrative standpoint, simplifying it and having one point of contact for the government is enough reason to. I mean,
Mm,
even if they weren't collecting any points, just having uh, one system to deal with, one company to deal with, it just simplifies everything. And when you
yeah.
consider over a million members between guard, reserve, active duty, and then all the different branches and the different regulations within the different branches, it could be a logistical nightmare. So putting everything into one system just really simplifies it for everybody. I'm sure that alone is more
Yeah.
cost savings than whatever points they might get.
I appreciate that you have the government's back on this. They need you, Ryan. But we need you too, which is why I'm so glad you're here to help us today because you've got this insider like view on this stuff that is just, I mean, invaluable. So tell us what financial help from the DoD or like quote unquote allotments around military moves do you find that most people don't know about but should?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, whenever you PCS, you obviously are dealing with moving, and it's not a quick process. So, you're typically going to be going into your next duty assignment, and it might take you a couple of days to get there, depending on where you're coming from. Especially if you're going overseas to stateside or stateside to Oconus, either way. So there are a few things that you need to be aware of. You need to understand what your travel is going to look like in between locations. So are you going to be on a rotator flight? Are you flying commercial or government procured? Are you staying somewhere? Are you staying in a hotel? Are you
Hmm.
going to stay at your new base? excuse me, there are some lodging allowances. For example, there's the dislocation allowance, which is an allowance used to partially reimburse a service member for expenses relating to your PCS move. There's also temporary lodging or certain temporary housing allowances. I think TLE and TLA, temporary lodging expense and temporary lodging allowance. Those cover reimbursement for lodging and meals. And you may also be eligible for per diem. Your BAH may change in between locations, especially if you're taking leave. There are more kind of subtopics within all of this than we can cover in detail on this conversation. But those are questions that you should really look into before you do your move. And the
Mm,
reason we can't get into all of them is because every situation is going to be unique. You're moving from stateside to Oconus. You're going to take 2 weeks of leave in between, or you're going Oconus to Oconus, and you have, your overseas. There's a special type of leave in between overseas assignments. So basically, you can mix and match. Choose your own adventure 100 different ways,
sure.
and each of them are going to have slightly different outcomes. So the key here is to get educated, understand that each situation is going to be a little bit unique. Go to the military, I think it's dot movie, the moving dot mil or whatever the government travel
Yeah,
site
move dot
is.
mil, I think
Move dot
now.
mil.
They
Yeah,
keep changing it, so
it happens. Yeah. So go to move dot mil and just really start reading, contact their customer service, read the FAQs, and educate yourself on what your situation is going to be like. My first move, I was really lucky. I PCSed from stateside to overseas,
mm.
and well, actually, it's just my first duty assignment, and my household goods was like 2 boxes of clothes and a guitar. So I went directly to the base lodging, and then from there they put me in a dormitory, and that's about as easy as you will ever have a military move. After that, you start shipping furniture and
Mhm.
cars and things like that, and it gets a lot more complicated. So that's the key. Understand that there's travel involved, there's hotels involved, airline tickets. You may have to ship a car. You may get housing allowance. There's per diem, all of these factors. So if you can keep that in mind, educate yourself and understand that if you have a question, there's going to be an answer somewhere, and there's probably a program in there to help you somehow.
Mm.
It's just a matter of educating yourself and kind of being an informed consumer, if you will.
Yeah, you really have to own your own moving process. I think we've heard that a couple of times from different guests in this series that this is your move. And yeah, the military is, making you do it if you want to put it that way, right? But you're the one who's moving and it's your stuff and you really need to advocate for yourself and be a participant in this process. You cannot let a move just happen to you. And that goes with packing your things, it goes with unpacking your things, and it absolutely goes with the financial side of it that we're talking about today. You have to know what's there for you and how to leverage that. And it also, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, goes back to the service a little bit too, because a lot of these different, the allotments or programs exist, but how they're leveraged for you may depend on which service you're in.
I'm going to agree with you there. I don't know all the ins and outs of the different services, but yes, I absolutely look and see, go to move.mil and see what the government is doing in general, but look
Yeah.
into service specific avenues as well.
Yeah, and I think maybe just checking with your transportation office might be the best way to figure that out. Because, they're really supposed to be that repository of that information from big government down to literally where you are standing on your base. I cannot tell you, Ryan, how many times I've asked Transcom something and the answer is, what's allowed is this. How the service does it is up to them. And it's like, well, thanks, guys. That was a super specific answer. Appreciate your time. So just depends on the service, but part of that is because every service has their own culture and their own way of doing things a little bit and expectations, and for better or for worse, they like to keep that stuff in play. And by the way, since we're on the subject, for no one is that more true than the Marine Corps, y'all, Marines. I gotta tell you, we like to make fun of you for being so special, but are small enough service that you are able to do things very specifically your way and it works for you, and it's really impressive. Let's take a pause to thank our sponsor, Navy Federal Credit Union. You can let Navy Federal Credit Union help you save on moving expenses with one of their low-rate credit cards. You'll enjoy a 5% lower average APR than the industry standard, plus rewards that don't expire as long as the account remains open. And they have 24/7 help from their US-based member service team. Check out NavyFederal.org for more information. Navy Federal Credit Union. Our members are the mission. Ryan, tell me, like, what are a couple of these big financial mistakes you see people make during their military move? Like, maybe warn us so we don't make them.
Yeah, there are a couple big things to look out for. The big one is not planning ahead, right?
Mm,
So the average PCS costs approximately $5,000 out of pocket, and I've
wow.
seen that number in print. I don't know exactly where it came from. I'll see if I can get a reference for you later. Um, but yeah, it's 5,000 out of pocket. Now, obviously, my situation where I moved to my first duty assignment, I had a couple boxes of goods, and I just went and stayed in a hotel. That's not a big deal. That cost me a couple meals because I didn't have a government travel card or
Oh, no,
anything
it's
at that
just
time.
you too, right? You
But
don't have
yeah,
kids in
and it was
the
just it was
house. Yeah.
just me. But so here's a situation. You're a two family car. You've got several kids. You're moving overseas, or you're moving from overseas back to the United States. You've got a week of leave for household hunting. You're staying in a hotel. You think of these things, and if the government's only going to ship one of your cars, you have to decide, well, am I going to pay to ship my other one? Am I going to drive it myself? If they're not paying for it, I have to pay for my own gas to get there, and I have to stay in hotels along the way. There are many situations where all of a sudden it can get very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of planning for out of pocket expenses, try to take some time, like you said, to be your own agent, right? So you
Mm,
need to be aware that this is not going to be a cheap and easy move. This is going to be, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and plan it out. Say, okay, if I'm driving myself, if I'm doing a partial move or something, then I need to plan this to stay this number of nights on the road, drive this many number of miles, stop this number of times for food, those kinds of things. Another thing that some people underestimate is their weight. You
mm,
have a weight allowance. So as and there's a public list, so you can go find this information, but it's based on your rank and whether or not you have dependents. So I'm just going to grab a mid-career enlisted person. So we've got an E6, for example. If you
mhm.
have no dependents, you're eligible for 8,000 pounds of goods, and if you do have dependents, it's 11,000 pounds. Now, 8,000 and 11,000 pounds sounds like a lot until you realize they're throwing tons of boxes and packing materials at you. And by the time you add it all up, and you can go to an online estimator and they'll say how many houses, how many rooms are in your house. Do you have XYZ big furniture or big items like a grill or certain things like that? And they'll give you an estimate of your weight, just ballpark. If you can use one of those online estimators, you'll see that 8,000 to 11,000 pounds, that it goes quickly.
Mm,
So you might be talking a 4 bedroom, 3 or 4 bedroom house at that point. Um, Speaking of shipping goods, things like a barbecue grill may or may not be allowed, depending on, you can't ship gas and hazardous stuff. That's a
right,
whole
right,
nother
right, right,
topic.
right. Yeah.
But underestimating your weight allowance is a big thing. And you don't know how much it weighs until they drive the truck to another place and weigh it. So
Mm,
if you go over your weight, you're going to have to end up reimbursing the government for that expense. And you can't go back after the fact and say, well, let me remove these items. So understanding that, but also understanding that some of your professional gear, like your uniforms or any specific work related equipment, that doesn't count toward your weight, but you have to have that set aside and marked as such. That's
mm,
called pro gear, professional gear.
mhm, mhm.
So, and it might be, I don't know if there's an actual weight allowance. It says, I think up to 500 pounds or something like that. It just needs to be declared and packed separately so that it's weighed separately.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay. And let me see. I think there was one other item. Oh, yeah. When we were talking about cars.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't think the military will ship however many cars you want. I think it's one car per service member. So if you're dual military, they might ship two. But if you're one military family, I think they'll only ship that one car.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So then you're kind of like deciding, am I going to drive the other one? If I think about this, of course, in terms of moving to
Hmm.
Alaska or super far, right? The
Yeah.
government will pay for a plane ticket if that's what you're going to do, or they'll pay for you to drive up in your own personal vehicle and ship a car. It's sort of up to you how, in a lot of instances, how you get there. But I no matter what, you got to decide how you're getting a second vehicle to a not very close by place.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, especially if you're going Oconus,
Right.
or from Oconus back to the
Sure.
mainland.
Yeah.
So in that terms, yeah, in that situation, what some people like to do is they keep one nicer car,
Mm.
but they'll keep one inexpensive or kind of a beater car that's just for local use. And when they move, they'll sell that car quickly right before they leave. And then they'll pick up another car like that at their next duty station, something they can buy once they get there within a few days, and then they have it for all their local use driving.
Yeah.
The big thing to look out for is having two cars with car payments,
Mm.
because if you go overseas to some places, you may not be able to take one of those cars or both of those cars. If you have payments, some lenders won't let it out of the country. And
Mhm.
then some countries even have prohibitions for bringing cars in. Like Japan is very strict about whether or not you can bring cars into their country. So
Mm.
I would encourage people not to overextend yourself with car loans, because a PCS can it can be devastating financially for
Yeah.
those who have car loans.
That's interesting that you bring that up because I would not have, obviously the vehicle is a consideration for when you're moving, right? But I would not have s- tied deciding whether or not to have two car loans as a PCS issue, just like right off the bat, right? Outside of this conversation, that would not occur to me. But that's absolutely, you're right. That's something to think about. What happens when I have to move with two cars that I don't actually own in full? You know, that's a big deal for people.
It is. Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
Okay, so what are some money actions that people can take right this hot second, regardless of where they are in the current PCS season? So that's maybe they're moving soon, maybe they're moving while they're listening to this, you know, to prepare for the next time. So, regardless of whatever mistakes are being made or not made right now, what can we do for later?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a lot of actions people can take. The first is education and awareness. So you can go to move.mil, check that out. You can just be aware of the certain things, like having a plan for your cars, for example, having a plan for your household goods. One of the things that I did every time I moved is I would take pictures of my expensive items,
Mm.
electronics, or I've got a couple of guitars, so I take a picture of the guitar, take a picture of the serial number, and that way, when things are shipped, you'll know, okay, if it disappears, here's how much you can claim it for. Or if it's damaged, you can say, well, here's the item.
Right.
I did have several items stolen, and one thing I learned, and I wish I would have done this before. They were just a bunch of DVDs were stolen out of my box, and they had just sliced through the clear tape,
Mm.
taken the cases out, removed the DVDs, and then put the cases back in. And I didn't notice this until after, a month or so after my PCS. And by that time, I never even filed a claim. There was just so much going on in my life at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you can do, and I guess this isn't something you prepare for now, but um, as boxes are being made, with if they use clear tape, just take a Sharpie or a marker and squiggle over both sides of the gap in the box, so that if it's ever cut, you'll know it's cut.
Mm.
And
Mm.
because they'll have to tape over it again, and it's not going to look right. And immediately you'll be like, wait a minute, something happened. So that's something I wish I would have known. And every move that I've done since then, I've done stuff like that, and I haven't had any more problems with theft.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so things you can know, education, like I said, keep track of your expensive items. Another thing is to get rid of things that you don't need anymore. Just go through and purge your annual spring cleaning, if you will. If you have kids that have outgrown clothing or toys or sports, or you're on PCS move number 4, you're in a hot weather area and you're still carrying around a set of skis and snow gear, you know, certain things that are location specific, you might be able to get rid of them now and then pick them up again at your new location. So you're not hauling stuff around the world and using up that precious weight allowance. And then if you have pets, pets are a big topic. I don't know if you've covered this in one of your other topics, but
No,
if you're
not
going to
really.
stay,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't have pets, but I know people who have PCS with them. If you're going Oconus, it can be a major, major issue. Stateside to stateside is usually not a big deal. Pets are usually not included in your travel cost. You have to pay for that out of pocket.
Hmm.
If you're going overseas, you typically have to pay to quarantine them for anywhere from a week to a month to however long it takes. Every country is a little bit different. Some countries have rules regarding which types of animals they'll allow in. You can bring a cat or certain dogs, but you can't bring like a Doberman Pinscher or a bulldog to many countries. You might not be able to bring birds or ferrets or other types of animals. So uh, have a plan if you have pets. So,
Mm.
and understand that if you are going to be PCSing with them, you're probably going to spend a lot of money to make that happen.
Yeah, it's, so many of the things you're touching on they're both practical issues, just like, what to do with your stuff kind of stuff, but also financial considerations. And that's a lens that I hadn't considered. Practically speaking, yeah, I want to figure out how to get my dog to the next spot, right? But from pocketbook perspective, doing that is a huge, huge expense for a lot of people, especially right now in pandemic times when we are they've sort of cracked down or cut down might be a better term on how many flights are available with pet cargo. We had a lot of drama over the last couple of years with getting pets to and from Guam specifically because there was an air carrier that moved pets for folks that stopped servicing the island. And so then it became this major issue trying to get particularly very, very large dogs off and on Guam, and so on and so forth. And so it's, I mean, man, that stuff really adds up so quickly. And I think it goes back to something that we were talking about earlier. You mentioned that the average PCS costs about $5,000. Even though we don't know where that statistic comes from necessarily, sounds true. Let's roll with it. Um, and that, we talked about the considerations of the government travel card, that it may or may not be paid off very quickly. All of this makes me wonder, how much money should folks have in the bank to get ready for a PCS just in case? What do you think?
Um, in terms of the actual amount you should have,
Yeah, like
oh yeah,
savings, like what kind of savings should I be working up to be ready? Call it an emergency fund, call it a PCS fund, whatever, for that potential
yeah,
expense.
that's a great question. I'm gonna hedge this one and say it's going to depend on your family
Hmm.
situation. If
Mm-hmm.
you're a single airman, soldier, marine, sailor, you're probably going to be on the lower end of things, maybe $1,000 or $2,000 if you don't have pets. If you have a family, if you're planning on driving, if you know you're going to need to spend, a week or two house hunting, it's different if you're a family with several kids
Sure.
and you're going to be looking for a house to buy versus an apartment that's close to base for easy access, right? So if
Yeah.
you're just looking for an apartment close to base, you're single, you're probably going to need just a few days to find something in most areas. But if you're a family and you're looking for that right home in the right school district, you might be looking for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to find something. So your out of pocket expenses are going to be a lot more. So I would say anywhere from 1 to 2,000 on the low end. On the
Hmm.
high end, I'd probably say like $3,000 to $5,000. And
Yeah.
again, it's going to depend if you have kids, family, pets, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that we've touched on that a bunch of times today, right? That it depends on your service, it depends on your circumstance and where you're going, what you're doing. We can give you the best advice in the world. I think that we're doing that today, that this is really all spot on, but you're going to have to put it through your own filter of your own circumstance. And that's just that's how it goes, guys. I'm sure you find that to be true, Ryan.
Yeah. While we were talking, I did look up that stat about
Mm,
$5,000. So it is a real statistic. It
great.
came from the Military Family Advisory Network.
Okay.
It's militaryfamilyadvisorynetwork.org. And they have a moving military moves infographic. And at the very top, it says military families typically move every 2 to 3 years, and each move can set the average military family back about $5,000. So it's not a made up statistic. It comes from what appears to be a very good organization. So I would say that's a lot of truth there. So the key though is you can reduce that 5,000, I think, with careful planning and just being aware of the benefits that are available to you and how to plan around them. And I think that most people can bring that down to less than $5,000.
Yeah. But you know what? If we're sitting here talking about how people can get ready for a future PCS, say putting a little money away, saving for something that hopefully you're going to be reimbursed for, it won't kill you. It's a good idea to have a little bit of cash in the bank for emergencies, or whether that emergency looks like a PCS or not. It makes me feel safe.
Oh, I'm a big proponent of the emergency fund. I keep one in a separate account where it's only there for emergencies. I also know people in the military families who have a separate PCS move savings account, and it's literally there just for a PCS move. And
Yeah.
they may only keep $1 or $2,000 in there, or 3,000, or whatever they feel is appropriate. But they'll also have an emergency fund as well, and they keep funds there. So if they need that money, they can tap into it.
Yeah, and while you're saying that, I was envisioning our own named, bank account, PCS Fund. We had a savings account like that, and I titled it that in the bank system. And man, was it a good day when we stopped PCSing all the time because we're a guard family now, and I
Yeah.
changed the title on that to something like Hot Tub Fund.
Nice. Yep.
Right? But like it's there for an emergency, and when that eventuality isn't a part of your life anymore, the money is still there. It's not gone. It's just you can use it for something else. So it's a good feeling because military life will never be all you experience, right? There's all sorts of stuff going on in the world that you get to do. It's a good feeling. Well, Ryan, I just am so grateful that you've lended us your insight and expertise today on this super important topic. I think there's so many more things we could talk about with this, but I don't want to overwhelm people. But thank you so much for coming on PCS with Military.com with us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Amy. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to PCS with Military.com. You can get all of the military news and information you need delivered straight to your inbox by subscribing to Military.com at military.com/subscribe. A special thanks to our sponsor, Navy Federal Credit Union, proudly serving all branches of the armed forces, veterans, and their families. No matter where you are in your military career, Navy Federal Credit Union has the products and resources to help you navigate your finances. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission.